Viewers, the talk has been divided as concept of gradualism and punctuated equilibrium, rates of evolution and extinction. Concept of gradualism and punctuated equilibrium. The distinction of species in a phylogenetic pattern in time is related to their distinction in contemporaneous organisms. It, however, presents some questions, especially when parts or traces of organisms out of association with each other or with whole organisms are to be classified. Example, conodonts, useful horizon makers, but occur in parts such as hard parts, spines, tooth-like structure, etc. The fossil evidences can be used as time plane from where the lineage is diversified. Figure 22. It is a 3D representation of phylogeny which have 3 time planes T1, T2 and T3. T3 is the oldest and T1 is the youngest. It shows that the lineage started with H and it diversified in time plane T2 into E, F and G. E became extinct, F became gradually evolved in the form of A in the time plane T1, while the G of the time plane T2 has diversified into B, C and D, and the time one T1 shows that all A, B, C and D are living. The same diagram can be shown in 2D by the lines, in which the dotted lines represent the time planes, while the bold marks show the clades A, B, C, D, which have diversified at time T2 plane from F and G, and they have common lineage with E joining H at time plane 3. The same can be shown in a lineage representation of phylogeny, in which H has evolved into G and it has then evolved ultimately to B. It is a 2D representation of same phylogeny. B shows lineage representation of phylogeny of species B from initial species H. This is dealt in detail under subhead mode of evolution. Paleontological taxonomic approach. Species in paleontology called paleontological species does not differ from the species in neontology called neontological species. However, incompleteness of anatomical, physiological, ecological or behavioral data of organisms that occur as fossils makes the paleontological classification characteristically different from the neontological one. Taxonomists find that skeletal remains or impressions of organisms cannot be associated with known lower taxa, but in the paleontological taxonomic approach, the organisms are classified based more on skeletal remains, impressions, etc., because geological studies require establishing the order of formation of sedimentary rocks on the basis of the order of appearance of taxa or phylogenetic lineages that occur as fossils. Viewers, now we are coming to part 3, which is rates of evolution and extinction. Fossil record and evolution paleontological approach of geological time gives a new perspective to understand the evolutionary process that help establishing evolving lineages. Besides how evolutionary rates have varied over extended time periods. From this emerged a concept of the rate and mode of patterns of evolution. Scientists find that the rate of evolution within the evolving groups is far from constant, yet a few general patterns of rate of evolution have been observed in many of them, as rapid in the beginning and declining or becoming static in the later stages. Rate of evolution or taxonomic frequency rates. Rates of appearance of taxa is called rate of evolution. For example, number of new genera of families per million years or the percentage of new taxa per million years. The general pattern of evolution of many taxa shows that it is at first very rapid, later declining, and in survivors become very static. Trachytelic evolution and adaptive variation, which is normally very rapid, quick. The origin of new species more or less equates with the extinction of old ones. Horotelic evolution. Once the main group are differentiated in the initial burst, the rate of evolution generally shows to a more normal rate. Bradytelic evolution. In a declining lineage, the survivor may continue for a long time, evolving slowly or not at all. The taxa under this are called living fossils, example Lingula, a brachiopoda. As such, a single stock may diversify rapidly and the descendants quickly become adapted for life in various habitats called adaptive radiation. Figure 24 is self-explanatory as it shows the evolution on the vertical line and the time period on the horizontal line. The T1 belongs to the first stage where the evolution is fast, and in time period T2 it becomes trachytelic because the evolution has slowed down, while when it crosses T2 it becomes horotelic because its evolution has further slowed down. Figure 25. It shows the age of million years on the vertical line and foraminiferal shell shape on the horizontal line. It shows that in Miocene period the species evolved rapidly, but in Pliocene and Pleistocene it became evolving slowly and became static after Pleistocene times. Part D consists of modes or grades of evolution. Evolution may be considered at three different gradational levels: micro, macro and mega evolution, referring to speciation and adaptation, adaptive radiations and origin of higher taxa. Rate of evolution is intimately connected with various patterns in which animals evolve, which can be perceived only through the fossil record, as it cannot be confirmed through living animals alone. Microevolution, also called as speciation and adaptation or evolution of one species from one species. The origin of new species from the existing one largely through changing interactions between animal and the environment within a time scale not too large is generally referred as microevolution. It occurs because of small scale changes within the species and especially the transformation from the species to a new one. Speciation, origin of species by lineage splitting. Anagenesis, phylogenetic transformation of phylogenetic gradualism, slow and steady. The new species completely overrides the ancestral species, causing the ancestral one to be extinct, as there are no members of the ancestral species remaining. Cladogenesis or splitting or punctuated equilibrium. New group of organisms may develop by evolutionary divergence, evolutionary splitting event from ancestral stock, where a parent species showing little or no change for hundreds or thousands of years splits into two distinct species, mainly because of geographical separation. Then both quickly diverge and form two distinct groups or clades. Anagenesis versus cladogenesis. In former, one species evolves into another within the same lineage. In the latter, one species breaks into two populations, which then evolve separately and form two distinct groups. Both have merits as viable mechanism of evolution, as shown in figure 26. Figure 26 shows anagenesis on the left side and cladogenesis on the right side. Anagenesis is the evolution due to change, and the cladogenesis is evolution due to splitting. The third axis is time axis. Figure 27 shows the anagenesis versus cladogenesis, in which the left side of the diagram shows speciation without splitting, while the right hand side shows speciation due to splitting into two descendant species, and the vertical arrows are showing the geological time. Gradualism or phyletic gradualism or gradualistic model or evolution, it is a conventional way, also called as classical Darwinism, to explain phyletic change. It emphasizes that more than 50% of evolutionary change occurs at slow and steady rate through the proliferation of the species that causes a methodical change of whole gene pool and hence of the character of entire population. It may also look so due to incompleteness and bias in the fossil record. Punctuated equilibrium, it refers to step-like or punctuated nature or evolutionary phylogenetic changes that occur only in short-lived bursts or punctuations. It results into abrupt origin of new species followed by stasis till extinction. If the punctuated equilibrium is acceptable, then we need to think how rapid the changes occur. Figure 28 has been divided into 4 parts. The A shows gradual evolution, B shows punctuated evolution, C shows gradual evolution with splitting, that is cladogenesis, and D shows the cladogenesis with more than 2 clades descending over time. Allotropic or geographical speciation, that is also called reproductive isolation. Geographic isolation of populations or groups of population, example, a population split by mountain range or a river for terrestrial or land mass for aquatic organisms, may give rise to a new species through intermediate stages like a race with different ecological requirements, but still capable of interbreeding with the original population. After few generations, the group becomes independent for reproduction with fast evolutionary change. Macroevolution, it is also called adaptive radiation or evolution at higher levels. It is major evolutionary change, especially with regard to the evolution of whole taxonomic groups over long periods of time. It is diversification of internal stock into smaller stocks, each becoming adapted to the own environment. It is in the study of macroevolution that paleontology has perhaps the major contribution to make, like mass extinction, adaptive radiation, convergent evolution, coevolution, punctuated equilibrium, and developmental and gene changes. Adaptive radiation. Adaptive radiation diversification of a single ancestral line, an evolutionary process in which species diversify rapidly from ancestor into many species when the environmental change makes new resources available, creates new challenges and opens new environmental niches. Once the members of one species find distinct niches, they evolve and proliferate into different morphological features, which is also called adaptation. For example, the Darwin's finches, in which the beak shape of different species is different depending upon the material they are thriving on, example seeds and other related things. Allometric changes, it is the study of relationship of body size to shape, anatomy, physiology and behavior. Such changes can be gradual, some indeed are quite abrupt and hence are difficult to understand. Aristogenesis, it is development of new character or structure. Neoteny, gaining of sexual maturity in the juvenile stage, thus eliminating the characters of adults. Once the maturity is adopted, rapid morphological changes may occur. Example, some planktonic copepod may be neoteноusly mature in planktonic larvae in crustaceans. Pedomorphosis, it is retention of juvenile character into the adult. As such, the whole morphology of the species is different. Examples, eyes in trilobites. Mega evolution or origin of higher taxa. The term is used for great changes in evolution, example Cambrian explosion or radiation that occurred around 540 million years ago represents a relatively rapid appearance of most major animal phyla, some of which are now extinct. Normally, evolution rate is measured by rate of origin of species and the rate of extinction, but in this case it can be said that by the end of Cambrian every phylum or almost every phylum existed. It is also seen as a possible objection to Charles Darwin's theory of gradual evolution by natural selection. Before about 580 million years, most organisms were simple as they constituted individual cells occasionally organized into colonies. In the next 70 to 80 million years, however, the rate of evolution accelerated. Viewers, the organic evolution followed several different patterns in the geological past. The first is called divergent evolution. It takes place because of accumulation of genetic and phenotypic differences in a species, which leads to the formation of new species and occurs due to separation of two populations by a geographical barrier. Then after a few generations and evolution, the new populations become unable to interbreed with one another. Example, Darwin's finches, Australian marsupials. Convergent evolution, it is an independent evolution of similar features in a species of different lineages. It creates analogous structures that have similar form or function, but were not present in the last common ancestor of those groups. Parallel evolution, development of a similar trait in related but distinct species descending from the same ancestor, but from different clades. Viewers, we may conclude that the study of graphical account of evolution in geological time scale has developed in the last 2.5 centuries. It began with the first idea of binomial nomenclature given by Linnaeus that gave scientists an idea of tree of life, and that was adopted by Charles Darwin to propose the origin of species. When the concept started getting popularity, the scientists restarted interpreting the Linnaeus scheme and they came up with the phylogenetic tree, and from here the different graphical trees have been drawn. One must take a clear account of the non-evolutionary graphical figures from the evolutionary graphical figures. In the evolutionary graphical figures, the geological time span is the most important factor, without which the lineages cannot be established and they cannot be used in geological perspective. For a geologist, sometimes it is difficult to appreciate the traits which occur only in the form of fossils, because they cannot be seen in the laboratory, but these fossil traits are all the more important because they give you an hypothesis how the different phyletic lineages were attached in the deep time. Thank you.